Cops are pretty thin about this on-time stuff, so punctuality is something for me. I'm Mike Koval, and I've been with the City of Madison Police Department since July 11th, 1983. And in that capacity, most of my time has been spent either in patrol or training and recruiting. And so this newest gig of mine as the chief has only been since April 30th of last spring. So it's been sort of a robust time, not just for Madison, but I dare say for our country. And to that extent, at times today, when we have questions that might come to the fore, I might put a context into it because I don't know that the narrative is always necessarily one and the same in the sense of what we see playing out on a national, sort of the things that we see inundated through the cable news services vis-a-vis what we have as an experience in Madison. Typically what a lot of forums have started or discussed in some sense is that the Ferguson experience and how that was such a terrible time for the country in the sense of what the expectations were or were not, and how the police lived up to those expectations or did not. And so invariably people will say, Chief, do you think that the same sort of calculus that left us to the malaise, to the discontentment, to riots, to people who are concerned that the police are doing too little, too much, or whatever, do you think that that narrative could occur side by side in Madison? And while I cannot dismiss out of hand that race relations between the police and our citizens hasn't certainly come at some very low ebbs, frankly, I do think that there are some unique things in that which is Madison, which is unique to Madison, that's far different from the Ferguson experience, and to that I'm very hopeful. For one is sort of, I always start with a default in the sense of who is it that we ask to take on these positions of trust for our community. Our community is now about 90 square miles with over 250,000 census population, which does not include or embrace all of those who attend the University of Wisconsin, many of whom bail out of the dormitories after the first obligatory years, and they're in the city. And so we've now got 5 different districts with building a 6th on the near west side, and I have 455 officers over 5 different shifts. And so we do have a lot of the same urban issues that you see plaguing a lot of communities of comparable size and strength. But the strength of the people that we're looking at, I think, is at the end of the day what makes us an enriched environment for change. My profile, to be so bold, of an average entering Madison police officer recruit is 29 years of age. They virtually all have a bachelor's degree. A fourth of them have a master's or are working towards completion of a master's. And unlike what you'll see as the cast is struck in so many of other communities, we are not, never will be, I hope, sort of the one-size-fits-all, only the criminal justice majors or those with that life experience need apply to us. As a matter of fact, they're the anomaly to the profile, frankly. We have people with Russian medieval history, to hard sciences, to teachers, to social workers, to community activists. And if you look at these folks, a lot of them, this is their second or third life or job, significant work experience. A lot of them are intrepid travelers. Many speak a second language. And I really think they sort of come to us with sort of an eclectic renaissance to them in the sense that they don't have any preconceived or ordained notions about what the role of police is, except to the extent that they know that in some shape or form, they want to be a grassroots sort of activist for change. Because through school, through what they've read and researched, or because having grown up in this greater Madison area, there's literally something special, something scintillating that makes them want to make a contribution, really work for them here. So with that in mind, how else does our paradigm shift from the national dialogue? Well, for one, we have our own in-house academy. We don't farm people out to these state academies where they're, quite frankly, residentially based, boot camp and militaristic, with a high level quotient on attrition. Quite frankly, we do an awful lot of investing and looking at the people that we're hiring. And then once we bring you on board, it seems counterintuitive. Why would we want to then make your lives miserable and make you want to leave us when I'm trying to make you invest in us and invest in this career? So you need not have known anything about criminal justice. You need not have ever been in a street fight. Certainly, at 26, I never touched, handled, or heard a gun fired. And now that I'm a firearms instructor, I can tell you for a fact that's the ideal student to have because you don't have any bad habits to unlearn. It's easier that way to just teach and sort of as the artisan at the spinner's wheel, you're the clay, and we create that opportunity, that template. So I think that it starts with the people that you're putting in positions of trust and the image that you want to create. The image that we've had for some time, dating back to the days of Chief Cooper in the early 1980s, is that he wanted this department to move to the tune of a different drumbeat. I can remember back in my days in high school at Madison West, then the belt line was 2 lanes and you faced each other. And at that juncture there was a billboard that caught my eye and it said, "Join the Domestic Peace Corps." And that really sort of resonated and hung with me for a great deal of time because I thought that was completely counterintuitive to all the other stereotypical references that I had seen where the emphasis was law enforcement. This was policing the Domestic Peace Corps. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with the term law enforcement, except that it doesn't begin to tell the measure of the span of what we do. As a matter of fact, since the dawning of uniform crime reports and incident-based reporting, enforcement of laws, law enforcement is roughly less than 25% of what occupies an officer's daily duties. In essence, there's an awful lot of other things that go to the point of crisis intervention, mediation, first response and giving first aid, traffic facilitation, a lot of civil issues, landlord-tenant disputes, things like that. And now, of course, as some of you may have seen, we've just launched as of last week a special initiative that goes to mental health outreach. So many of what we do here in Madison, we've had easily over 2,500 calls dealing with people who have a mental illness, have experienced or are suffering some kind of an emotional breakdown or something. And in some way, shape, or form, they come into contact or we get called to address their needs and see what can be done. And obviously, that's something that we think we can be doing even more work in, which is why we've taken this sort of grandiose step to launch this initiative. So at the end of the day, I think that when you think about law enforcement, understand that when I'm talking about my department, I will never refer to my family, my MPD family, as law enforcement officers. As a point of reckoning, I will say they're police officers because law enforcement is just a subplot, a component part of a greater modality of the kinds of jobs we ask them to do every day. That's just a basic measure of an introduction. The forums aren't really meant or intended to be me talking at you. They really are intended to be an opportunity for you to ask what questions you will. All my handlers, I guess, are at the back of the room, so you don't have to worry about me being afraid of any questions you may ask. What you actually see, to be candid, is since this is a central district listening point, I thought that would have commanders or command staff from the central district who might be able to address any and all those questions that are unique or specific to the central district, above and beyond perhaps what I could address more specifically. So, does anybody want to start with a question or a comment or a criticism? Anything? Anything? Otherwise, oh yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of time. I just wanted to say, I live in the Tenny Lapham neighborhood, and talking to my neighbors and myself, we really support the Madison Police Department wholeheartedly. So you do a great job. I listened to Terry Gross last week on NPR, and she had a woman who wrote a book called The Yellow Side. The average police officer dies 10 years younger than anybody else. It's a hell of a job. They can't even get me to do it in LA. And, my hat goes off to you. So come down to the Tenny Lapham neighborhood. If other neighborhoods don't want you, we will take you.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Appreciate your kind words.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for all you're doing for these sessions. They are so important. We've never had this before, so I'm just shocked. But anyway, thank you. I read your newsletter today very carefully a couple of times. There's so much there. Thank you for doing that. First of all, on what you said about, I'm right here downtown. I had no idea about the protesters and what was going on. Sometimes, can I tell you, please, that I feel that when it comes to, I know Michael Johnson well, and I talk with him often, and we're trying to keep up on what the group, the Gifted, is doing. Yeah, but sometimes I feel like you go a little overboard to appease. There are a lot of sides. And because of Ferguson, I'm hoping I can get over our police here, whom I trust explicitly, to stop trying to appease and face what the real problem is, and realize that we can't bow down and just accept everything. That's number one. 1033, correct me, am I wrong? On
Federal program?
NAACP, your newsletter today.
The 1033 federal program.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. I could go on forever for that. I wish everybody in this room had read it, and if you haven't, I'm just gonna say, read it. When it comes to your other point about cameras, I always, when I heard about cameras, what that means, just to me, I'm speaking for myself, cameras on police, you know what that means to me? Safety. Safety for the police, safety for the victim, and safety for innocent bystanders. But, after reading what you said today, I'm not quite so sure. My jury is still out on that. I trust what you say and what you think explicitly, but you say this isn't Janesville, they're doing it. We're not Janesville yet. Yeah. I hope that, Chief, I hope that we don't get that far, but you are the first person in all these years to say we have a gang problem in this city, and you know more than we do. We're in the middle of it, right here, a block away. You know more how long it has gone on. You're the first to admit it and to want to deal with it, and I thank you.
Well, that's very gracious of you. She's raised a number of issues that perhaps I can just sympathize a little bit for us all. With respect to the notion of the protests, your view of me being a little bit overly indulgent and overly tolerant is actually sort of where the mail is coming in and filling to this side of the ledger, in the sense that I think a lot of folks are now impatient with me and the direction we've taken in terms of facilitating those protests. I think that we're going to take these on a case-by-case basis, because I personally believe that police officers are really, truly officers of the court, albeit one step removed. And in that capacity, you take a pledge to uphold the constitutions of both the United States and the state of Wisconsin, as well as the City of Madison Charter. And I do think that we should be ever so sacrosanct with ensuring that we're preserving those fundamental constitutional rights and individual liberties that strike at the core of what makes for a wonderful country such as our own. And that means at times even taking the tack of facilitating and fostering those opinions which may be sort of in the minority of those holdings, and they may inconvenience people. But I think nevertheless, we have to be mindful of giving those folks that opportunity to voice that objection. Now, each and every instance has to be tempered with weighting and balancing the rights of the motoring public and those others who are so inconvenienced for that. Up until now, we've had sort of an unhealthy, at times, truce. It went out well initially when we first started working with the group that you referenced. I think where we had a little bit of a flashpoint was when the decision was made that they wanted to take marches and rallies and sit down and occupy Easttown and Westtown Mall. Now, just so we understand, my authority, if you will, to facilitate and foster the First Amendment has its limits in the public square, if you will. Though Easttown and Westtown are open to the public, those are privatized spaces. And case law has been fairly rigorous now in saying those privatized owners can in fact assert their roles of trespass and what conduct they will or will not condone or tolerate. And initially, my SET team, which is the special event team, reached out to Westtown into the local property management company and tried to tell them what they could expect with the protests that were coming. And the initial reaction from the property management group, absolutely not. We don't want anybody in here, we don't want banners, none of that. And frankly, I think it's a tribute. It's a badge of honor to the SET command staff who literally were respectful in going one step over the local management and suggesting that the regional property manager take an active role in looking at this in the long analysis, big view. And the regional property managers said, defer to the MPD on this one. And our first one through Westtown in the height of the holiday buying and Christmas and shopping season, it was contentious, but it was without an incident. It went okay. They did occupy an area of the food court, thereby shutting down commerce for at least one restaurant for a good about 6 minutes or so. But that in and of itself, we can move on. What happened to sort of amp things up and hostilities sort of became a little greater then was then when we went to Easttown a week or so later, and in the context of getting to Easttown, it was sort of a roundabout march in which they occupied East Washington Avenue, which we know is a major arterial. And that went in excess of 16 minutes. So again, now we're sort of on the cusp, because literally I can see cars backing up to the square. And similarly, the back line from the Sun Prairie side was backing up. So at one point, the crowd was asked to pinch it in a little bit, and we were at least able to get one lane of traffic inbound beyond them, so no safety concerns. That was a little sketchy because we're starting to push the border of what's reasonable. Then once inside Easttown, they did the same sort of modus operandi, ultimately ending up in the food court. And because of the sheer largesse of their numbers, there was much more than one merchant that was inconvenienced. There were at least a half a dozen. And the other thing that sort of was a new sort of spin on the theme is that now, from time to time, those who had the bullhorn, the speaker, which, remember, first of all, their very presence could have been cited for trespass. Bringing in a banner and cutting across lanes of pedestrian traffic was also violated. A bullhorn, also beyond the pale of what would have been reasonable for a privatized owner to be able to expect or understand to be reasonable. But then when you get on the bullhorn and in your animated passion, and I get that, when you start to drop F-bombs or other swear words, that's not protected speech, folks. That's speech that's intended to antagonize and incite and inflame. And I can tell you, because I've been at all of these, when you have moms and strollers or grandparents And they're literally going like this, cupping the ears of the youngsters and pointing this menacing finger at me. You gotta do something about that. That's clearly beyond the pale of, again, what's reasonable based on the totality of the circumstances. So we have attempted, as we will, it is who we are in the Madison method. Each and every time we get wind of any group, let's not just focus on the one that's been most recent, any group, it is our desire to work hand in hand with either the real or identified leaders to say, how can we make this a balanced perspective of a win-win proposition? How can we entertain your First Amendment rights of speech and assembly while simultaneously respecting the rights of the motoring public or those others who want to be merchants or go to other places or restaurants without imposition? So that's where we're coming from, and that's where we will always be going to. And you'll note that in all of these demonstrations we've had to date, and I think this is where people are getting very chagrined with me as the chief, there's been not one citation or arrest. Not one. Yet. I say yet, because now, as you saw on my blog, that, God bless you, I thought, you are my mom. Only my mom and you read this blog. She said, thumbs up too. She lived in Raleigh, Durham, though. She's out of the cold. That's all right. So, I related two events. Friday the 25th, Friday night, there is a teach-in at a nearby campus building, which is great. And then subsequently after the teach-in, a group comes out and they take to the streets. And they basically occupy. Now this is during evening drive time, folks. And there's a Badger hockey game and a whole lot of other stuff going on. Literally at the point in the 700 block of the University Avenue where they decide to hold this human barricade across the lanes of traffic. At that point, there's very little for us to do in terms of rerouting or redirecting the traffic. There's only so many places you can go other than taking them up Bascom Hill, roundabout like a billy goat to try to get to the other side of this. And again, we were patient. But patience has its limits. At 20 minutes, we then told them, we're done. Vacate the road or citations will ensue. Got it. Right on it. That took another 8 minutes. 28 minutes, it's too long. It's unreasonable, particularly when the cars are backed up. For that time of day, for those circumstances, with alternatives that we were prepared to do for them, that was unacceptable. And that was clearly communicated to folks from here on in. These are all on a case-by-case basis. And my first default is never going to be ticket or arrest. But those who would choose to engage in civil acts of disobedience have to understand that the other element of being civilly disobedient is that there is a sanction for that sacrifice. So far we have not closed that loop. It's been all unfettered. Now, last Monday, the irony is that we had been in contact with a spokesperson for the same group and asked for that spokesperson to give us timely advance notifications so that we could work with the group in facilitating those rights. The group said yes. We parted. I'm literally still only in the 10th hour of my day downstairs, and I get a harried call from someone up in the mayor's office who said, do you realize there's about 25 people blocking traffic down here at the corner of Doty and Martin Luther King? Unannounced, spontaneously. I saw the video later, and I can tell you, I can assure you, you had agitation from the motorists. It was extremely volatile, a lot of noise, a lot of reciprocal contempt for one another. The volatility of that is exactly why we have to be present. To protect people from themselves or to protect people who might take such a contrary view that they decide to take that SUV and pooch right up through that human barricade. That's how fragile some of these things can be. So, when I learned of that, normally we have a set team, a special events team, to cover that contingency. They could have jumped a block ahead, rerouted traffic in and away, and it would have gone its natural course. But when you start to use tactics like that, you have to understand, had those officers, which I'm now pulling from all over the Central District, had they been available, each and every one of those people would have been cited. And if they didn't have identification, they would have been physically arrested. Because that's the end of that's how you close the loop of civil disobedience. You understand, I actually excerpted in my blog today a beautiful recapitulation of the First Amendment as articulated from the American Civil Liberties Union. Now I can guarantee most chiefs in America are not going to be citing the ACLU as support of their cause. But even in the ACLU narrative, it acknowledges that civil disobedience does bear some culpability. Speech is protected, but there is still responsibility that goes with that when you cross various laws. To your other points, we talked about the protesters, and then you talked about, what was the second program you were talking about? Oh, gangs. Pardon me, early onset. I have said since I became a police officer in 1983, David Cooper is a mentor to me and will always be a mentor to me. He's probably the reason I entered this vocation. But on one strategic matter, I think he made a mistake. And human beings can make mistakes. We are all feet of clay. He took the tack to suggest to the public of Madison that we had no gang problem. I was a practitioner in the field at that time. We had a gang problem back then too. But I think in the interest of public safety and wanting to do what was best and not have an unhealthy worry about people worrying about gangs proliferating in the streets, that we basically went into a denial or a spin mode, which I disagreed with that. And the lessons, or my takeaway was that I'm not happy here leading the clarion call for all that is melancholy in Madison, but I also think that I have to acknowledge to you, without putting a sort of spin on things, that in any 12-step program it starts with, I've got a problem. We have a problem. We have a problem. We have lots of problems about Madison, and one of the ones that can't be ignored, frankly, is the race and disparities issue. Some folks, as I've gone to forums, have said, gosh, Chief, you ever get tired of talking about it? I said, no, actually, probably not. We probably have to talk about it almost as if we would recite the Pledge of Allegiance so we don't get away from it. Because there were some very startling revelations in that. And I don't think that we should minimize, deny it, or rationalize it. Again, we've got to acknowledge the problem in order to make headway on it. And to that extent, do the police have a role? Absolutely. Are we complicit in the final statistics? Most assuredly. We are, after all, the gatekeepers to the criminal justice system. And I've always said, to that extent, when we have rogue cops behaving badly, and they've been adjudicated as such, or if we have systems in place that somehow or another have had a de facto impression or bottom line result, which leads to these disparate examples, as the chief, I have to be the first one to answer those questions. I have to ask of my own institution, what are we doing wrong to create these perverse outcomes? But most importantly, I have to go to those constituents who are most affected by saying it, I'm sorry. This was not intentional. This was not with a sense or measure of purpose, but it is what it is, and now we have to do everything in our power to try to effect some constructive change. We're committed to doing that. We want to do that. And please understand, some folks gave me, not some, a lot of folks gave me some healthy feedback. And the feedback was that I did a blog. I feel like I should be in Father O'Malley's confessional. I did a blog. How many Hail Marys was that going to get me? So I did a blog. But the only reason I authored a blog, the only reason this got started was when you called me out, Chief Mike Koval. And the word was demand. Number one, demand. You will leave our neighborhoods. You will take your occupying forces away. You will allow us self-determination. And then you copy count your demand to the entire free world, you're going to get a response. If that's what you wanted, I'm not anybody's doormat either. And the beauty of me, the simplicity, I am not polished. I will never, ever run for office. So I really don't care if at the end of the day I don't win Gallup poll numbers that put me up ahead of Mother Teresa. That's really not what keeps me awake at night. I lead with my chin. What's my benefit? What's my pro? My strength is my passion. What's my downfall? You got it. It's my passion. I'm not perfect and never will be. You'll hear me apologize many times over if I've ever purposefully hurt anyone, intentionally or otherwise. But, I am not ever leaving the neighborhood. We can talk about how we police in those neighborhoods. That's fundamentally a part of the calculus of change. That's clearly worth our discussion, and I hope those discussions are robust and prolonged. But to suggest that I'm just going to leave? Just going to leave? Absolutely not. I came in April 30th. I spent 6 months passionate about the fact that the best way we police is relationally at a grassroots level in these damn neighborhoods. I lobbied 20 council people and a mayor who said that this was the most austere budget we had ever seen. Talks of layoffs, furloughs, cutbacks. And to each of these committee hearings that I ever went to, and Mike, you were at some of them, I've said over and over and over again, if you're asking me what's going to happen in 5 years from now about the city of Madison and our quality of life, I've said to every audience, we're going to see the experiment played out in 2 laboratory settings. The first is the Madison Metropolitan School District. We have 27,000 students at MMSD, and over 65% of them qualify for a federal subsidy for breakfast, lunch, or for both. Folks, that tells me that the chasm between the haves and the have-nots has never been more pronounced, and it's growing by the hour. You want to talk about root causes of city problems, let's talk about poverty and all that that engenders. Okay? And then I've said, the other element where this is going to be played out is in the neighborhoods. You go to the City of Madison website, you're going to see we have 120 plus registered neighborhoods. We're a community of neighborhoods. And then I asked 5 district captains who have their pulse on what's going on in their district. I said, come on, I have this feeling. We could be doing more in our neighborhoods. The neighborhood officer program is what made us special. As a younger officer, we were up to 18 neighborhood officers. When I inherited the office, 11. I want more. Because when I asked those 5 district captains, I need to be able to show the council, the mayor, that if we could somehow or another find the funding, would it be worth their while? Would we have those sort of neighborhoods that are on the cusp, sort of percolating, could go one way, could go the other? Do we have such a thing? Because I have a sense that we do. And each of those 5 captains gave me a minimum of at least 6 neighborhoods, some more, 8 to 10. But what you're telling me is that people that we pay money to study the peaks and the valleys of what's going on in their districts, of their neighborhoods, we now have a fourth to a third of them reporting to me that they have major concerns about where we're headed. We're on the cusp, could go one way or another. So that's why for 5 months, I lobbied, I talked, I spoke. I met with groups like this. I tried to win every heart and every mind I could, and then some, to say we need to be more relational. It starts with police officers assigned to patrol, but it has to transcend patrol. Patrol officers are always constrained by chasing calls for service. That's their unit of work. The call, the call, the call. I want them to take the time and effort to be relational. I want them to talk to victims. I want them to build empathy with people that have now been victimized and are trying to sort out their new normal. I get that. But there's always this sense of urgency because there's always the call. Neighborhood officers are not driven by the call. Neighborhood officers are driven by the call. We're talking about going beyond and beyond crime prevention, crime investigation, crime apprehension. We're talking about people who want to make a difference in quality of life issues. Hey, we got a landlord here that doesn't give a damn about tenants' rights. Heat's not on, water doesn't work, who do I talk to? Hey, we got people that can't make the next rent check and they can't feed their family. I've got neighborhood officers helping people teach job skills. I've got neighborhood officers creating community gardens. I've got neighborhood officers going to the Boys and Girls Center and taking computer time and helping kids with computer and giving them supervised and structured behaviors to just run around. It's 2 in the morning and the duplex next to you, the noise is so loud the bass will send your dentures out. That's not the big one, but that's a quality of life issue. Neighborhood officers, they can follow up on that. They're not call driven. I'll tell you what, once you have a community neighborhood officer, you know what the hardest thing about getting a community officer? Taking them away from the neighborhood. Jean Papalia, perfect case. She was my neighborhood, she was our neighborhood officer down on Willie Street. The point of the neighborhood officers is to get that neighborhood to what I understand some groups want is self-maintenance, self-fulfillment, self-actualization. I want that for every neighborhood. Some need a little more tender love and care than others.
Well, that ain't sort of not cool, man. That's sort of, to me, I just respond. I've been listening to you
Go ahead.
talk and stuff like that, man. You know, to me, that's sort of like invasion of privacy.
What part is an
I mean,
invasion of
without-
privacy?
That's just like the Black Panthers when we did that back in the day. Okay, when you service your own community, you don't need to. See, sometimes we go out, we don't need to get you involved.
And that's perfect.
In our community activity, as you so eloquently put it. If we can handle it ourselves, then what's the point?
The point
Now, we
is,
don't need people coming
yeah, the
down,
point is, though, hold on a second. The point is,
spending that
whenever-
money like that, we do it ourselves.
and that's fine.
You know, but we ain't gonna call.
That's fine. Therein lies the rub. When we go to the neighborhoods and there's enforcement action, if there's a contact, a citation or arrest, 95% of those calls are not because I'm witnessing someone doing bad behavior. It's because a victim, a witness, a complainant, a landlord, a mom or dad has picked up the phone, called 911 and said, "Get the cops here now." If anybody can tell me that if a woman is battered in a neighborhood and the neighborhood will just handle that, that's not reality. That's not what our statistics show us, sir.
But that's reality though. I mean, if you see somebody misusing somebody, to me, it's like you have, like citizens arrest, you know, like when you know.
Wisconsin does not recognize citizens arrest. It's a statutory legal fiction.
I watched two of your cars, your police officers in cars, drive around the corner of the Capitol, and college students had just come from the bar, and they was peeing on the man. And they stopped right there at that light, right there at Anchor Bank and Subway, and they was peeing on him right there in the doorstep. And they had time to see it, and they just kept turning the corner. And we had to stop them from peeing on the person. And two of your officers in cars were standing right there at that light, and they could see that because it's in the light. If you go to fragmentation or whatever, and them kids came out the bar and peed on that man like it was just for fun, and they didn't even pay attention to it.
The distinction is, before we get into too many individual cases of what I saw, what I heard, is that I will acknowledge officers have been entrusted with a great deal of discretion. Discretion that can be used for right, or discretion that can be abused or not used appropriately, if at all. When we go down that lane of, I have a friend, I had a case, the problem is no set of facts are going to be perfectly replicated in each and every setting. We can't.
Not the way, because it's gonna be y'all word. If that officer wrote it down, that's what they say, that's what it's gonna be. However you try to phrase it, you can do it a whole lot of ways.
And so your systems improvement in that situation is to do what, sir?
If it's written, if that officer write it, and he said that that's what he saw, or whatever.
Well, how they didn't see it?
And then that's,
They
Okay.
couldn't saw it. Right in the light.
actually.
We saw it and we
actual
down the
footage.
street. We the one
Sir,
had the
all
stuff.
I can tell you is what I tell a lot of people, is that when I hear anecdotes of bad behavior, misconduct,
It's a lot of that
I
on
can't-
y'all side too, though. It's a lot of
Understand.
that on y'all side too.
understand?
You know what I'm saying? Real talk. A lot of y'all could be your constituents.
Yep.
And get all out because he bristled up because he got a pistol. You know what I'm saying? And everything because he's the law, and he can get you for, if you don't like something that you saying, then he can get you for disorderly.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of that.
But I'm not going to get into the
And- but I
individual
just was just
vagaries
throwing
of
that
what
out.
you see and what happened
I'm
when,
gonna
because
put
that
it
doesn't elevate the game to the point that I have acknowledged.
It seems like y'all.
But
I have
you-
acknowledged that we have
It seems
issues.
like y'all trying
But
to
if you
devote
don't,
money
hold
to
on,
the law.
hold on. If
Yeah.
you cannot report something in real time, and I
Well,
hear
we
about
have
it
to say
weeks
it,
or
man.
months later,
These
there's
your
not much I
troops.
can do about it.
You the commanding
Your
officer.
troops.
I'm the chief.
Commander,
Right, you the
supposed to
commanding
do
Yeah.
officer. You supposed to be able to just say,
Yeah.
I have a follow-up.
Yes.
Do you think the police officer discretion allows for effectively two different justice systems?
It can allow for that potential for abuse, absolutely. I actually think that our department talks about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, known as discretion, by putting it in our code of conduct and recognizing all the factors that can go into where otherwise things that look like the same may result in different treatments or different outcomes. I'm not here to suggest that I have 455 choir boys.
you showed on.
I'm not.
Showed on, wow.
Sir?
I'm sorry, I'm not from here, and I've heard reference to this group. This one behind me mentioned this group, you referenced the group. What's the name of this group?
Well, I'm trying not to invoke the name only because the group in and of itself, to me, is not where I want to go with the discussion on a higher plane. I'm sure they have no problem because they are very proud of their affiliation, but I'm not trying to do anything to marginalize the group. The group is Young, Gifted, and Black Coalition. That's the group, but I never make reference to it in today's blog because I really don't want to get caught up in Koval
So where they
versus YBK. I want to talk about the principles of First Amendment, reasonableness, and when we will or won't take, excuse me,
Where's somebody black at? Well, you just. so
You're here.
eloquently put it, but why nobody else saying up there?
We here 'cause we
representing
just-
citizens?
I have 455 officers and
not
12%
one
of them are
person
black.
that's standing
I'm sorry that they're
And
not
half
here
of them
today.
downtown harassing
I
the
mean,
homeless.
you brought it up, you heard.
You know, on
Here,
any
here's the
given
deal,
day-
here's the deal.
On any given day, on any football game
Yep.
day, you can walk down the street and see everybody drinking. But you know what? They follow us down the street every day, and it's 7 of us with just a 6-pack.
Mhm.
And then they wanna come up and roll up on us like we some any given group. And all we doing is just chilling and minding our own business.
Okay. I'm just gonna say a few things here on this, and then you can
Them choir
continue.
boys, okay?
Pardon?
I said, those were your choir boys, you know.
My choir was, well, first of all, downtown, we have issues above and beyond what you see perhaps in other districts. And one of the district issues are those who would panhandle, those who would drink open intoxicants in plain view during times when they're blocking merchants, they're blocking pedestrians, they're asking for money. It's not just the drinking, there's always behaviors that are in conjunction with it
And what
that
area
leads
is
to us.
this in? State Street?
Pardon me?
State Street?
I would say Philosopher's Park is a problem for me. I would say the downtown at times, depending on where you are, time of night. The corridor on Fridays and Saturdays nights in the summer, down at Francis Street and University, we have problems. We have problems all over the city. I'm not denying we have problems.
Capital.
But in terms of allowing a sense of decorum for everyone to participate, I understand where you come from and you understand where I come from. Let's let somebody else share the opportunity to talk. Yes?
Why was there such a delay in possibly prosecuting the officer that probably went beyond his jurisdictional authority when he shot the victim, Keenan, I think his name was?
Okay,
Back in, and that happened in my neighborhood.
in the Baldwin corridor.
And why was that held back from the public to such a degree where even the officer's name was withheld for a while? Just like it did in Ferguson. I mean, the sense I'm getting is it's only a matter of time it's only a matter of time before a black person gets shot here in this town. I mean, the clock is ticking.
That sure ain't gonna happen.
Can I respond in now? Can I respond to him without you interrupting? Thank you. The point of the matter is this, is that at the end of the day, that event was a very publicized matter. That event did go to the district attorney's office. That event is a civil rights violation that is still currently being looked at by the Department of Justice. That event is still being litigated in a wrongful death action in a civil court. So to suggest that somehow there's been an implicit cover-up is completely contrary to facts. Next.
Just first, I'd like to say that you interrupted this gentleman first. He hadn't finished his statement when you interrupted him. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you for all you do, you and your officers here in this town. I think you are doing a lot of progressive things. I believe you've somewhat misrepresented the Young Gifted and Black statement when they did use dramatic language, but they clarified several times since then, and I think it's a bit of misinformation to continue representing the statement the way it was originally written, when what they were asking is that communities of color be policed the way that white communities are. And that they clarified that several times, is that they just want their neighborhoods to be policed in the same way, with reactive policing, and that everyone have a chance to have exactly this sort of discussion. Thank you for doing this, and bring it to the next level and keep these conversations going, and that really that the police should be accountable to each neighborhood that they're in, and that there should be systems in place to allow for that, and that neighborhoods should be all policed the same, and that all people should be policed the same. The sort of discretion that you're talking about is being applied in a systemic way, even though it is individual discretion, and the numbers show it. And that's the huge racial disparities that exist, that is there for a reason. And I just, I know you said that you have a commitment to helping resolve that, and I hope that that continues to go forward. And that you do everything you can and listen to all the ideas that are being presented, regardless of the language that they're presented in, because not everyone is going to speak in the same tone or use the same words, but their voices are still important, and what they have to say matters, and how they're experiencing things matters. So from the statement by YGB to what everyone in this room is saying, I hope you aren't shutting things out because of how they're said, and consider policing all neighborhoods the same, as opposed to different standards for different neighborhoods.
If I may respond, one, I am a recovering journalism major, so words mean a great deal to me. I can tell you, I still have the original letter. What they meant, what they intended, what they inferred was not what they said. The demand was, have the occupying forces leave our neighborhoods. Subsequent to that, when I responded, yes, there were many variations on that thing. Oh, we did not mean that. Well, then you shouldn't have said that. That's the first thing. The other thing that seems to get lost in the mess of all these facts is that we have the numbers. In the 17 to 25-year-old category of African American males, if you look at the top 10 places where there are negative contacts resulting in tickets or arrests, they're not in the neighborhoods. If you look at the top 25, they're not in the neighborhood.
What do you mean by that?
So what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, we tracked all those numbers over the course of a year. The top 10 areas, you want to know where they are?
What?
The 2 bus exchanges, East and West. The 2 malls, Easttown and Westtown. The 4 high schools and 2 prominent discount stores. That's where the numbers are. Now what we did is we did take the booking sheets, we took the tickets of all those folks that did have an arrest or citation, and we said, I want to see where do they call home. And that is where the reality is. They're calling home our neighborhoods. But the proactive, oppressive policing is not happening in the neighborhoods. And quite frankly, in those very public forums, 95% of those calls to the police are coming from third parties, witnesses, store owners, complainants, victims, witnesses, and the cops are responding to an objective behavior for which they have a duty to find an articulable basis to either stop, detain, or release.
That's your job. That's their job. That's
Well, I
what they call you.
live
That's what you're
downtown,
supposed to
so
do.
after a football game, when you walk down the street and you see mailboxes kicked over, kids burned up, mopeds thrown in the middle of the street, and this and that, that ain't us doing it.
Well, I didn't say they were.
So what statistics you got in that area?
Probably
When
because
somebody
of,
call and say my car turned over, or my kid's been burned over, or my moped been thrown in the middle of the street, you got statistics for that?
we probably do have statistics because we take
but you ain't
statistics on
taking
all
those
incidents in Part 1 crimes. The question is,
Oh, them ain't crimes.
yeah, those are crimes.
But if I go out in the middle of the street and throw somebody's moped in the middle of the street, and one of your officers drive by and see me doing it, what they gonna say to me?
They're probably going to arrest you for criminal damage to
Yeah,
property if
so
the
then,
moped was
well,
damaged.
well, how they miss all that then? If you got all these
It's a
informative,
question.
smart
It's
officers.
a question too, in the context that you created your hypothetical.
What you mean? You can see it all the time.
In the
Any-
context
at
that you
any
brought the
football
facts
game.
to me, you said it's post-football game. In a post-football game
So you can just
environment,
act the fool
we
at
have
a
a lot of
football game.
officers who are chasing a lot of calls.
So you can just act crazy at a football game.
People are arrested at football.
Yes.
games.
I'm talking about when you go down the street, when they just throwing mopeds out in the middle of the street. We walk down there every
Question?
day. We live downtown. We see this every day. The next day Sunday,
What
there's
I'm
a
saying
whole
is that
bunch of mopeds in the middle of the
There are
street.
double-digit,
Oh,
from what I read, there are lots of arrests. So
No,
you
there
can't
is
just talk
lots
about the
of
ones
arrests.
that aren't getting arrested.
Well, who ain't getting arrested? We like we getting arrested.
Let's go back to the questions here and then Amelia.
Yeah, I wanted to back up your discussion about the Young Gifted and Black in these events. And I want to say that to me looks like a very useful model to apply broader gun enforcement, because what you're doing is you're taking the high-level view and looking at harm reduction and making that a higher priority, the end result, than the letter of the law enforcement. And I think that I congratulate you on that. Particular because the difference between civil disobedience back in the day and civil disobedience in today's legal and economic environment, is that the consequences of getting thrown in jail today are way different. Our civil rights heroes that got thrown in jail 30 times could have a life afterwards. You get thrown in jail twice in a current environment, and you're basically screwed for life, because we have a vindictive system, and we have it reinforced and very well integrated with the economic system, with the social system, with the schools, with the employers, with the landlords. You get one of those points against you, you have no place to live, you have no place to work, pretty much for life, unless you can somehow escape your identity. And that's a big difference. So I applaud you in holding back on using that sanction, because it's not minor like it used to be. Okay? I'm a white guy, I got all my privilege, but I've had my experience with a false charge in the Capitol that I could not escape. Why? Because people not downstream from you in the DA's office, assistant DA decided, despite all evidence, including video, that showed that it didn't happen the way that the complainant said it happened, decided he could get a conviction anyway, because that's how bad our courts work. So, so I'm just saying, you have to really be more reticent about using the high powers that you have, because the consequences downstream are way huger than it used to be. And we do have to undo all that on all those levels and in all those arenas. But if you want to start helping this problem, we have to do what Diane Nash said the other night, which is stop cooperating. And so you need to find, I think, the ways that you can continue to not cooperate, which is the example of, yeah, you could have arrested the whole damn bunch of them, right? I would have been there at some of them, and I would have been arrested. But you chose not to, and I applaud that. That's working on behalf of the community and looking for your main job really ought to be harm reduction at this point. And if you want to have a better budget to do things that are constructive, you need to suspend your activities that cause harm.
What was a lot of things there, a lot of content-rich stuff, and I want to comment on some of it. The biggest problem of my response to the open letter was that I actually tried to preface my bottom line about leaving the neighborhoods with a suggestion that I actually think that I could live with a lot of institutional change, which I dare say I could completely applaud, support, and testify in behalf of Young, Gifted, and Black Coalition. CCAP, that's my #1 enemy. Debtors' prisons based on debt-related tickets that accumulate and then create impositions for life. Possessory drug crimes being criminalized. There was a lot of stuff I would like to put the age of 17 up to 18 for criminal culpability, while kids are still sorting through youthful stuff that goes on in high school. There's a lot of things that I believe we have common ground in terms of looking at reducing institutional barriers or things that promulgate racist practices.
That ain't what y'all doing though.
So, well, I'm trying to find people that will hook up with me on some of these legislative initiatives.
You talk, I mean, I ain't, like I said, trying to interrupt or whatever, but you talk a good game about y'all, but you don't know nothing about when you out here on the streets. You know,
Well,
and when you, it's a whole difference when you fall into the system, you know, you can be out there and all of a sudden, like you said about, you catch a person and then they get a ticket. I mean, it's a whole lot of unnecessary stuff. Y'all spending these budgets, you're asking for things. We're hearing about the Ferguson case. Y'all already got a bad rap because y'all popping folks, you know, and making other people. I'm just keeping it 100. And ain't nobody really saying nothing because they're afraid of the brass and stuff like that, but I fear no man. But my point of this here is I'm listening to you saying this here, and I still find it's a whole lot. You keep talking the Black Coalition. I ain't saw one white person up there talking, and you keep saying that, and you repeated it again, man. And I don't see no results of what you're doing. I see the results of what you're doing to quote unquote African American people. You know what I'm saying? But you spending a whole lot though, and then you focusing, y'all too much focus though on the homeless community. See, I'm the spokesman of the homeless community. My name is Silas Chili. Y'all know who I am. I was arrested for something that I do. Blowed all out of proportion not too long ago for assault you know, strong arm robbery, blowed it all out of proportion. Where was you at then in 2011? Remember this story. In 2011, with James Larry, who got out of prison, we talking about that before them, got out of prison, and he massacred my whole family, 7, in Chicago, 2011, when he drove from here and he drove there. Tony Galligan had the story, Sandra and all the congressmen did the story. Where were you at for me then when you was talking about that though? And when he was at though? When he done what he done, he talking policing.
You know-
It shouldn't even have got to that level. But you're talking about though, it seems like you're spending too much time on stuff that you should not be.
To your
And you
point.
should be more focused
I'm sorry.
on other stuff, because I'm hearing you talking. And ain't nobody really feeling too comfortable.
To
You know,
your point about where were we
where were
when
you,
during the
at?
vic.
Where
That's what
were
I'm
you
actually
at?
like to try
And
to
then
shift.
Why did y'all bother me? Then you find out, oh, here goes this person here. What's wrong with him? You already know what's wrong with me. He drove from here, from Chicago, 2011,
Mhm.
killed and massacred my whole family. Okay?
I know he did.
And
What-
said,
what your-
and
what your
then,
point
but
is
you-
about-
but he said, where were your police in that thing? Where was they at then? Why was they picking with me then? When I was telling them then, too late now.
Yep.
Too late now. So now when I go through my strange metamorphosis and transform a little bit, and then you got the wasting taxpayers' money to come get the people here, who you spending too much time though, on the homeless and other people who are less fortunate, but you'd be
Sir.
surprised.
I have a question for you.
Yeah. For me?
Yes,
Okay.
my understanding of what you're saying is that you are now asking the chief, where are the police when you need them,
Exactly.
right? But
Right.
then about 10 minutes ago, you said that you don't want the police there. And I
think
feel
you're
like it's.
misunderstanding what he's saying. So
No.
what my brother Silas here is getting at
Excuse me,
is an
excuse me.
inadequacy of the police.
Excuse me, because I don't think you were here when he first confronted the chief about.
I know Silas and I know Jeff.
No,
work
I
in this
understand, but
community.
I guess I'm curious,
I'd like to clarify, if you mind.
okay,
So
I'd
what
like
he's
to
getting at.
finish, I'd like to finish, if you,
Okay,
if you.
feel free.
Okay, because you were not here when he first spoke about what I'm referring to. And I guess I just feel like, I mean, I hear what you're saying, where were the police when you needed them? Well, it sounds like what the chief is trying to say is that these neighborhood police officers would have been that response, because they would have been where you need them. And
Well,
so,
But they
How
never
can
been.
neighborhood police respond to something that happened in Chicago? That's what he said.
Right.
What he was pointing at was an inadequacy of the police for issues that deal with mental wellness. This is a mental wellness issue. That's why the person drove somewhere else. Now, when someone says, where were you, police? To me, and please correct me, Silas, if I'm wrong in interpreting this, but to me, what that means is that what could the police have done in this situation differently? There's a theory here that more
Differently
police
than
in the
what?
neighborhood, there's a theory here that more police in the neighborhood might have prevented this from happening. But that's not the case. This person did not commit a crime in their neighborhood. They committed a crime in someone else's neighborhood because they had problems that they were dealing with and unable to find peace with in this neighborhood. That's not something that more police would fix. That's something that mental health should be, that's a mental health issue. Does that make sense?
well, yes, and it doesn't matter where, I mean, I understand it matters where this crime was committed. The fact that it was was not in Madison, it's the point that you're making, which is that police need to be there in some facet that would have been of help. And how are you defining what that help would be?
How would more police being there?
issue
No, I'm
is-
asking you, how would you define what you want
The
the
issue
police
is,
to
how can you
do?
get away with
The
some
question
crimes
is loaded.
and you can't get away with other crimes?
Well, but
If I could just bring it
Say
back a
if I
second,
took a-
because I think,
Oh, man.
Eric,
Say if I
Your
took a
point was
moped
about-
in a frat house.
it was a
at
mental
party
health issue
and
of the
just
sort.
set it off and blew it up.
Yeah, because
But
you don't
then I
really
turned
know how this
around and
person
went to
is.
your
We
children's
under,
house
yeah, we
for
don't.
heroin,
We
they
don't have
died.
all those answers, but I can tell you what we are committed to is creating
And I
more
get life.
trained mental health officer practitioners who can work with families and providers and look for those cases that might fall behind the crack or beneath the crack. That's something we just announced. We're starting. 5 officers do nothing but mental health work. And in terms of you described a very difficult,
No, you can't be-
paralyzing issue of being
No, you
victimized.
can't do mental health and then police, man. If I call you, your job is to come, I say I need some help. You ain't trying to figure out my mind. You into the mental
You
health.
always have that right
No, you got
to decline the
You
service.
just
I don't
call-
disagree.
When I call you, tell you, man, look, I got a problem with this situation, get over here and relieve it. That's the 911 call there. That's what you do. That's your job. That's totally your job. If I don't call you, I don't need you in my business.
And
my
that's your
point.
prerogative. That's your right.
So, but if I call you, you do just what that. Don't be trying to analyze me and say, cause you ain't no psychiatrist, cause you're not.
No, I'm
See, you
definitely not.
Just, see, you tend to.
But what I would say
Some
is
of the
that
officers tend to go out of they step over, they'll do something, just cause he's a cop, cause he's like, well, cause he's an officer, instead of, so you already feel threatened from him anyway. Then he could just pretty much tell you what he wants to tell you, which ain't in his title. That ain't his rightful title. Stick to your title.
okay.
A lot of your officers get out of there. Okay,
There was
get out of
another
line.
Hey, Chief,
point
I'm
though
gonna say
with,
something.
yeah.
I'm gonna read that one right there.
Sir, I mean, I've been in this town since 1988.
Oh, you got a
I'm talking now, man. I had an incident that happened to me. You probably wasn't the chief then, I'm sure you weren't. But anyway, in 1995, the cops were called down to Echo Tavern June 13th. And I had never really been in no trouble in my life. I had had a dysfunctional relationship with a woman I had a child by. She lived in Monroe. She drove from Monroe, Wisconsin to Madison, Wisconsin. I lived at 526 West Wilson. I had moved on with my life. This woman came down here. I calmed her down, go to Echo Tavern. I come out of the bathroom. I'm swarmed with police. They told me I done slapped her twice, choked her. The police didn't investigate the situation. They didn't ask the bartender or other patrons in the bar. They just took her at her word. They took me to jail and hauled me up to jail. My life ain't never really been the same since. And after they found out later on, they investigated, my attorney, Ms. Cooper's attorney, investigator, found out the bartender, I didn't even know Miss Rose, I never touched this woman, and she tried to tell the truth. You know, I ended up going to prison. I almost did 6 years of my life for something I never even done. And it's hard for a black man to overcome stuff like that, because now it's on my record now. I've been convicted of these things that never even occurred. And my life, right to this day, has never been the same. But it had the officers who came on the scene, they just assumed that this woman was telling the truth. I said, man, I didn't touch her. I asked the people in there, no one was listening to me. Wasn't a bruise on this person. And it just turned my life upside down, man. And I ain't never really got over it. Let me do one more thing.
Sure.
Right after that, this was just recently, I had set out a fine in Milwaukee. 30-day fine. I get back here in Madison, I'm walking the street, and next thing you know, they pull me and say, hey, we got a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Miller. I said, what? For a fine in Milwaukee. I said, ma'am, I already set the fine out. They didn't even bother to check. They drove me in Dane County Jail. And Milwaukee came and got me. When I got to, I had spent 8 days in this jail waiting to get back to that jail. When I get to that jail, finally got somebody who was listening to me. She checked, oh, we're sorry. You did set this fine out. You know, I had set 8 days for nothing, day after Thanksgiving. Number 20. I done said 8 days in jail, and I ain't been reimbursed for that time. So now it's twice this has happened to me. 6 years stint, now 8 days stint. No. What do you think I think about the police now? What do you think I think about the police now? And the DA system and everything else in Dane County here. I can't wait to get it. The only reason I'm still here now is my leg messed up. I got a surgery coming up.
Well, let me
I used to love this town, man. I hate this place now. You guys have took everything from me, man. That's why I came here to let y'all know it, too. And you can check the records and see that I'm telling the truth. Ask Miss Cooper, Debbie Blake Cutler, the one who put me in here. Now our son is 20. He was 5 years old at the time. All that time I did in prison for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Good day. Just go.
I'm sorry, sir.
Some
all I can
system.
say.
Go to hell. You guys have a nice day.
I think I said Amelia next.
Well, I had planned to ask something before that gentleman spoke, but I think that is precisely why traffic is held up. Right there. That matters so much. When someone is incarcerated or arrested for I don't know the details of that case, but that happens, and that matters. When children's parents go to jail, and it affects their lives, it affects how they're able to operate in school, whether their bellies are full, all that matters. And that does happen, that does start at some level with the police. It doesn't all start with the police, and the police aren't responsible for all of the disparities in the city by any stretch. But they are responsible for some, because there is some choice. There is some choice at the ground level. And so I guess protest isn't supposed to be convenient, and I mean, it really isn't. And frankly, if it wasn't inconvenient, most of us with white privilege would go home, neighborhood that I grew up in, I could just go home and pretend like this stuff is not happening. Go back to Edgewood and go back home and go have my dinner out at Nakoma. And I could have done that my whole childhood and never known this was going on. So the inconvenience is good, because it makes us think about it. Maybe we'll go home and donate a little bit of money towards Avid, Tops, you know, and donate a little bit of money towards the Rainbow, the different groups in town that are working to close these disparities, that really care. We could really turn around and not care. We have that option, and a lot of people do every day. So for those 3 minutes people were held up in traffic, good. That's great. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing I want to say is that Young, Gifted, and Black has clarified from what I've read. And going any further on the original words that they used sounds like you've got an axe to grind, Chief. And I just want to say that they've clarified to focus on what you agree upon, which you did do in your letter. And I was so happy to see that in that blog post. You focused on those things of which you do have consensus. But then it was like, you got the football, you're at the 5-yard line, and you punted it into the stands. You have all the power. You are the most powerful person in this city, okay? These people wouldn't be taking their time off at lunch to protest and stop traffic if they were in the position that you're in. They're not coming from that. They have to manufacture it themselves to be heard. Protest is the speech of the unheard. That's James Baldwin, right? I think I paraphrased it poorly. Right. That's why people do that. And these aren't people who are, I don't even need to describe what they do, but they're amazing people. And even if they weren't amazing people, they have a right to do that, and they need to be heard and brought to the table. And you are in a position of power to invite that in. So, but to go any further on the original letter, just you understand, the way the police in other neighborhoods, it's not the way the police are in my neighborhood. There are a lot of drugs being done in my neighborhood. I see prostitutes walking up and down the street in my neighborhood. I live near a very large collection site with very drunk people doing all kinds of things, but there aren't police hanging out in the neighborhood where they could happen upon things happening. I would say you can make so much money. If you sit outside of Nakoma Country Club on a Saturday or Friday night, you could make a ton of money on people driving. I know this, okay? Not right now, I don't want people there, but growing up, I promise you. Hang out outside of Maple Bluff Country Club. Get 6 cops just lined out outside. You will make a ton of money that night, and you will find that there were a lot of people, a lot of haves breaking the law. White people with a lot of money breaking the law, a lot. So I guess really the question I'm wondering about, which is I think Young, Gifted, and Black got to that eventually, is that how do you police, what are the tactics you're using to police these different neighborhoods? If you see a bunch of people gathered outside where my grandmother used to live, right on Brentwood Parkway, across from Warner Park, gathered outside on the sidewalk, are you going to approach that group of people the same as you would if you saw them over in Maple Bluff, gathered outside, or you probably wouldn't even ever see them. But how would those 2 areas be policed differently? Number 1. Number 2, do you have statistics on arrests that are made because of a call and arrests that are made because the officer happened to be there? Are you able to separate those and say, this many black people in Madison were arrested based on a 911 call, and this percentage is based on cops just being in the area?
The vast majority of criminal arrests are on the basis of a 911 call. They're not on-site proactive
Okay, and
What about
I'm
non-criminal?
just wondering what those statistics might look like.
Well, it depends, it could be
but,
like a bar, and that's a lot of forfeitures.
I guess that's really, you know, I think a lot of the things that you've outlined that you're doing with the mental health officers, the things you pointed out in your response to Young Gifted and Black's letter that you are working on, those are all great. That's fantastic. And I really appreciate it because it is a choice. Just like it's a choice whether you give someone a pep talk or you arrest them. Those are all choices. And the ones that you listed, those are great choices. I guess really what I'm hoping for is that there are more opportunities to sit down in a conversation, in a solution building session with people who disagree with you, with people who are asking you to do really tough things that perhaps will not make you popular in your department. Those people, inviting them in to sit down and talk to you about, are you pulling together statistics and making sure that you're submitting statistics on the failures of the department? Are you creating an educational environment so that people can learn about diversity and sensitivity on an ongoing basis? Are you developing an early warning system or something, like screening your officers so you know as the day-to-day life, as those things that they come into contact, the ugliness on the day, as that builds up, that it isn't building up too much so they don't all of a sudden freak out and do something they will get away with, because all you gotta say is, I feared for my life. But that you're actually screening that and paying attention to that. Kayaking, going out and kayaking doesn't undo PTSD. It doesn't address those issues. There has to be some sort of real approach to the day-to-day mental imbalance that can be created by confronting all of that ugliness. Are you screening the MDC system? So there are some things here that I would really appreciate it if we could. I know that it's really inconvenient when traffic is held up, and it's great that we haven't really even talked about police cameras. What that man brought up about the fact that when police write something down, that is what you know, that's what counts at the end of the day when someone is judging what happened between a police officer and a civilian. That is why I want cameras. I want cameras as a temporary, perhaps temporary solution. They're not for all neighborhoods. All neighborhoods shouldn't have. If the South Side doesn't want cameras, then maybe the South Side shouldn't have cameras. But where I live, in my neighborhood, I would like to see cameras on police. Not for I'd like to see a law in place that protects victims of domestic violence and sexual assault from being filmed. There isn't one currently. Cops could be filming them right now. But I would like to see those people protected. But as far as, I know firsthand that if an officer says I said something, it goes into the official record and there's nothing I can do about it. And that happened to me. And it was a one-line statement, and there were things added to it that I didn't say about my friend Paul Heenan. So, and it was saying that he had gone out drinking, which was really a convenient thing to put in my statement. Totally untrue, I never said that. So I would like to see police cameras. I know I just threw a ton at you, but, well, you know, it's great that we have these meetings, but it's also difficult to get down to brass tacks, because if only a few people are speaking, you want to hear from a lot of people. But there are a few of us who sit down and have made a study of this, and have a lot of requests. So,
well, we'll start from the last one and work our way up, I guess. The body camera thing, it's a $30,000 study. It's got an ad hoc committee. The driver is the common council. We have one voice on that, and that's only to provide a technical insight, to get practices, policies, procedures, synthesized from other departments, best practices studied. That is ultimately going to be the basis of what we decide to do for 2016. And I've said early and often that if this independent body, using their own means and their own 360-degree ways of polling focus groups, constituent groups, grassroots polling, online polling, privacy experts, if at the end of the day, based on all of those things that could be unintended consequences, some of which you mentioned, if at the end of the day, they come in with a resounding report that says, okay, We have decided unequivocally that this is the direction that the city of Madison wants to go. I'm not going to just turn a blind eye towards that. Obviously, we will relinquish that that is something that has been spoken by the people. Now, the question is, council, you come up with the money. Okay, you come up with the money. And a lot of people, with all due respect, a lot of people looking at the same eye-popping figures that this would require are saying, I'd like that money to use in some other community endeavor, that we think we get more than just transparency when we're actually looking for accountability.
I'd like to interject that the number that you presented would be for a camera for each officer.
No, it wasn't, it was for 335.
How many people do you have on patrol at
455.
any given time?
335 are assigned to a uniformed service of some kind, meeting the public.
So how many people do you have on patrol at, like the maximum amount of officers you have on patrol at any given time?
Over 200. Oh, 200 are assigned to patrol services. Over.
At the same time? Out?
Well, that's their assignment for a year. They're not
So
all
I guess
out
what
in
I'm
the street
saying,
at the same
shift, sorry.
time.
During a shift, how many officers? Like right now, how many officers are out patrolling?
Probably about 40.
Okay, so do we need, so
Just in
officers all
patrol.
don't need their own camera? So
Well,
the
that would
number
be
you gave-
contrary to best practices from the Police Executive Research Foundation, which says you have less excuse-making, you have more accountability if you assign one, and it's their responsibility to ensure that it's always being downloaded and maintenance by them, then they have no one else to blame when the technology fails. I'm just reciting best practices from PERP. So there are a lot of issues in terms of health and wellness issues, you're right. We need to do more for our officers. I'd like to think we're doing a great deal. We have worked very closely with Teresa Martinez, who is the city's EAP director, and she has a special niche where she's dedicated to looking at the issues of protective services, police and fire in particular, recognizing how much more important we have so many more exposures to critical incidents that need a proper vetting and diffusing and ongoing support for those experiences, as horrific as they are, beyond the pale of the ordinary. We have a peer support group that's in effect. Of course, if we have our one another, we should be guardians to one another. And very often, as a sergeant, I would hear people that officers would say, Sergeant, I think this person's going through some tough times. And you use that as an opportunity to see if we can get someone some assistance. And if it does become to the point where it looks like it isn't being handled, I can certainly have an officer ordered for a fitness for duty assessment. There are mechanisms in place for those things. You can't account for all variables, but we are working towards cutting down that open-ended question that I have the same with you. With respect to whose rights, I think that at a given point, I could agree that the nobility of the rights that you're affording that are worthy of inconveniencing some, I think that's noble. I think many of our people going back in time, those who had the courage to be civilly disobedient, took risks, and took risks that made for a better and a more just society. I don't disagree. But I don't want to be put in the position of saying, this person's rights are noble, this person's rights are just that they're inconvenienced. I can't be put in that position. Everybody has rights. I'm constantly doing the calculus of balancing that. And I won't say that one cause is more worthy of the police than our other causes. That's not my call as an officer of the court.
When we have the right to let kids live in poverty, and we have the right to let people be incarcerated disproportionately, and we have the right to allow children to, our education system to fail children, and we have the right to ignore it all, then perhaps we need to look at the latitude that our positions afford us to tip the scale back to zero.
I take that as a challenge to me, Amelia, and you know we've had these heart-to-heart conversations. I'm trying to do the best I can. That's all I can say. Yes?
As a practical matter, in framing what you consider reasonable about interruptions to traffic, for instance, I think you need to consider the interruptions that the city causes every time they do a construction project. Every time we have a football game, a parade, whatever. There are lots of interruptions to the orderly flow of traffic.
What's interesting about the orderly flow of traffic, all the things you just described are people that have applied for and have obtained a street use permit, so we can plan for that inconvenience.
A certain amount of that, but,
Once we hear that there's been a permit that's been filed, then they notify the police, and traffic engineering, and rerouting buses, and those sort of ancillary services.
So then it doesn't hold traffic, is that what you're saying?
Pardon me?
Are you saying that the use of a permit does not obstruct traffic?
Oh, it does, but it's been vetted by a party that's beyond me. It's a system of objective criteria that everybody has to go through if they expect to tie up those streets.
but in terms of what's considered reasonable, that distinction is not really important.
Well, reasonable is
Reasonable
going
is
to be...
what the inconvenience to the general public,
Well,
whether it's
clearly.
permitted or not.
There's a difference between being reasonable with what I can facilitate on a Saturday at 6 a.m. versus a Friday night on a major arterial street at 6 p.m. Those are very different reasonableness. It's a sliding, it's a moving scale.
Well, good luck with that second one with the traffic engineering department. They don't care about that at all.
Don't mind. Very serene. That's you?
That's pretty much.
What services will the mental health officers provide, and does anyone else provide those services now?
Well, he asked, what services will a mental health officer provide? First of all, just to be clear, out of all 455 officers we have, I'm very proud to say, all of them have been through an intensive crisis intervention service training. And it doesn't stop just at the point of the initial inoculation. We sort of get booster shots throughout the course of our careers with best practices. And we work with practitioners like Journey. We work with not-for-profits like NAMI and have them provide us contributions to keeping us at the top of our game, as it were, in how we're being responsive to these. We're always looking to national models as well to see if there are some lessons to be learned there. Above and beyond, a lot of the mental health officers have come to us with some unique experience in the field and or have taken additional classes and will get additional training. But at the end of the day, I want to be clear that anybody who's calling for the Madison Police, you won't be getting sort of a bare basic cable service with a police officer, and you want the premium service by the mental health officer. They're not as constrained by time, but they'll work with those providers and see how they can look at things differently. Usually, there has not been a single neighborhood forum where we're all touched now. A family, a friend, a loved one, someone we know who doesn't have someone that's struggling with mental health, and typically people politely file out, and then I usually always get someone who asks, who can I contact? The other thing you ought to know is that before we had the 5 mental health officers, I have a cadre of about 18 officers who sort of form an auxiliary unit, and they're dispersed throughout the city in all my 5 districts. And they are very attentively, proactively, either jumping calls that sound like it could involve a mental health issue, or volunteering to do more before work, or making calls of staying out and not being call driven. So we have a nice facility in terms of moving forward, but I'd like to actually see it expanded if I possibly could, because I think it's going to pay dividend. I have to tell you, I have some real personal issues when it comes to the mental health issues. I was a 5-year practitioner in 1988, in May of 1988, when I had my first real come to Jesus moment with the implications of mental health. And it was Lori Dan on Francis in Towner. And I went to check on her welfare that night. Something had been observed 2 hours prior, secondhand. Went to evaluate her with my partner. There was no knock at the door because it was described as her in a fetal position, laying down by a dumpster in a bag up to her shoulders. It was enough of a concern that I probably violated the 4th Amendment in the sense that I asked the property management to give me a pass key, not announce, no answer. Went in my role as community caretaker, saw her groggy, asleep, naked on the bed, I had my back up. A woman, I said, please put a blanket on her, get her dressed, I need to ask some threshold questions. What's up? Gonna hurt yourself? How you feeling? Being treated? Went through the not-for-profit side, then it was Dane County Crisis Mental Health. She has private practitioner, that isn't really our thing. Talk to a private practitioner, talk to a private practitioner. She postures a lot, no clear and present danger. I wouldn't worry about it. So, since whatever behavior had not been eyeballed by me 2 hours early, and I literally 2 hours later, forcing an entry under the rubric of community caretaker, got into and evaluated a woman who was sound asleep and claimed that she doesn't know what I'm talking about and she's not going to hurt herself and all that, I left. Because my legal options had pretty much been taxed out. Until 5 days later, when I learned that that woman went on a killing spree and killed an elementary school child in Winnetka, Illinois before killing herself. I lived with that.
She killed a family friend.
Since 1988. And then on my third day as chief, day 3, our officers are sent to East Washington Avenue where a man who's mentally disturbed and having an episodic breakdown stabs 3 people, killing 2 of them. Our officers arrive, he challenges them, attacks them with a gun, and they have to take his life. My concern is that as I talk to people, as I visit with people like Paul Ash, Luke House down in Ingersoll, who has a ministry of food and hospitality. I said, Paul, is it just me? These calls are going through the roof. Is it just me? I said, Mike, people are coming here sicker, more so than ever. It's not just you. And we're not getting any respite. There's no help coming from the state. County says they're tapped out. So I'm at my wit's end. We're going to try something. And I got to tell you, folks, there's been incredible pushback. You shouldn't be doing the role of a social worker. We're not paying you as police officers to deal with that. That's not what our taxes should be going for. I have put some political capital into this. I'm invested. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I can't even say that all the people in my department are completely pleased with me over this move. Because they are looking at the same issues that many of these taxpayers are. Is that really the role of the police? And I suggest it is. I suggest it is. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So you said a few things. I want to say a few things. Just briefly, you said it's going to happen. What is the it?
What part it?
You
For the
said
mental
it's gonna
health
happen.
context?
Yeah.
I think that we are going to commit ourselves to resources. That's what I mean the it is that we're going to continue to look at the issue and see if we can't, at a grassroots level as practitioners, do more than what we've done to date in connecting people with systems that can help them. That's where we're committed.
So what stuck out to me about that is the connecting people to systems. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen. We need to be able to connect those that are in need of services to the people that are equipped to give them those services. And the example that you gave of the case in, was that 1988?
Yep.
What's interesting about that to me is that a trained professional gave an assessment that said, it's okay, this person, and maybe that person was okay in that moment. My question is that, given that the officers that you train have what you call a top-of-the-line program, curriculum, and then you're introducing this method that you're going to try, I don't think that that's an unlaudable effort, but I'm curious how that weighs against someone that spent years going to doctorate school and getting licensed, and how you think your officers in this training that they get, is going to supersede or put them in a better position to make a different judgment than someone that is licensed and sees these cases all the time? That's my first question.
I don't presume credentially that we're in a superior position to do more than the person that you just described. What I'm suggesting to you is that those credentialed people are not working 24/7 to be there in the field, in the moment, dealing with the crisis. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
We're in the moment.
Okay. Also, there's this, the talk of, so quickly, what is the purpose of this, this community forum? What do you hope to achieve, before I go on to say the things that I need to say?
Well, I really don't have an agenda, except to the extent that when I took office, I made a commitment to the Police and Fire Commission that I think one of the duties of a chief of police is to try to make yourself available and accessible above and beyond emails or phone calls to the office or working through the chain of command. That sometimes some people want to grill the chief, and I said I would do that on a quarterly basis. And so this is the third round that I've done this since I began.
Okay. And what can the people here hope to achieve by grilling the chief?
Well, in some instances, it's to vent. In other instances, because they're in a unique district, typically if there's a case or a sort of trend of issue or problems that's unique to that district, I bring command staff in that district who may be able to provide a greater sense of context, what we've done, what we've tried, what we have yet to do. So I think to some extent it also informs me about those issues that are trending above and beyond what might be artificial and solely in an electronic world that I live in a lot. So, I mean, I come here with no set agenda or pretense other than to be available.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Digital world, you know? So I guess
And
you're...
I'm a Luddite in a digital world,
Hey,
that's
I
a
hear you.
problem.
I hear you. I'm on Facebook right now. So the hope then is, I guess, to hear from people in the community, right? And then you take that and hope to use that information to do something differently or do address their concerns in some type of a way. I mean, you've heard from people here. So is that what I heard?
Well, what I'm attempting to do is try to process it at a level that is reasonable for me in my role as the chief of police. I can't overpromise to expectations I can't deliver. One of the things that I think that I've been chagrined about is that I obviously, in terms of a sovereignty known as the chief of police for the city of Madison, while my heart might be with those people who are unlawfully detained and incarcerated in a Dane County jail, statutorily, I cannot create the impetus to do what the sheriff can only do. See what I'm saying? I think at times there is a sort of a blurring of the jurisdictional lines of what I can be expected to do reasonably or legally. And I do think it's important that when I hear someone whose life was inalterably changed for the negative, that's tough listening, but I have to hear it. And I try to apologize because I wasn't there for his set of events. I wasn't there for the second corollary that led to his first bad experience. But I think at a level of that which is decent to all of humanity, I think we can all agree, that's a sad commentary of a system that did not work. It was a miscarriage based on his version of the events.
I get that it was tough to listen to.
Yeah.
You know, I can only imagine how tough it was to actually live that and still live. Right now, it's a little bit after 7, well, way after 7, and we're gonna all go home, some of us, and go to sleep. That man is a homeless man, and the 2 other men that were here, Jeff and Silas, they too are homeless men. And working with Operation Welcome Home, I have the opportunity to be there through some of these instances. And I too have experienced these. So to try to say that you are sorry, I mean, well, you see how much that meant to him. He's still living, no matter how sorry you are, he's still living this experience. So trying to do differently doesn't change that man's life, or the countless others that have gone through that and worse and are continuing to do so at the hands of the people that you are in charge of. So while you don't have the jurisdiction to let people out, or while you may have checks and balances, there is still an accountability and a responsibility here to this person and that person and that person and the countless others that we don't see. You know, I mean, would you agree?
I agree.
Part of what I wanted to, I just wanted to ask some questions. I don't like to just come into a space and just get to talking, you know. But we've been hearing from our community, and it sounds like you get cases where people are saying we want more police. I imagine that there's somebody out there that's saying that. And then from the majority of the people that I interact with, and of course the circle of leaders that I'm a part of called the Young Gifted Black Coalition, we have a different view, and that is that the police are there to serve. Needed.
Serve all our people.
Serve all our people,
Yes.
when needed. Now, to me, we talk about the greater good, and that means that there's a need to project what could be best from your very limited perspective. Coming from a completely different background, it's hard for anyone to create systems that are comprehensive for someone that comes from a completely different background. It's kind of like a blind person trying to teach an art class. You know what I mean? You just aren't equipped with the know-how and the lifestyle, those little nuggets. Right now, we live in a city where we have 6% black population, roughly, and roughly 50% are incarcerated, and 75% of black children live in poverty. This is in your city.
Our city here.
How are you serving?
It's our city because we all have a role to play. We all are
Very
complicit
true, and we are
in
playing that role.
solutions as well as
We are playing.
identifying problems.
So I get that no one wants to say, I'm part of the system, I'm part of the racial disparities. But believe you me, people are, systems are. You just mentioned a systemic issue, a systemic problem. Who is part of that system? You know, I mean, wouldn't you agree that the Madison
I don't think
Police
that the
Department is
Madison
part of it?
police have ever denied, at least I have not as the chief, to the extent that I say we are accountable to that for which we have an ownership stake.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt. I've never minimized that.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that you have. So we naturally all play a role in this, in perpetuating the disparities in some of us and attempting to calm those disparities. When it comes to your policing efforts and your top-of-the-line training, it's my understanding that looking at what you've done so far, the training that you have so far has also played a role in the perpetuation of the disparities that we see. To say that the Madison Police Department plays a role in something, but the training does not, that's counterintuitive. So naturally, the different aspects of your police department play a role in perpetuating these disparities. So when you say we have top-of-the-line training, that top-of-the-line training has contributed to the disproportionate arrest of people that look like me. And then when you're crafting solutions to address those disparities, we talked to a group, and as you can see, one of two people in here that represent the 50% that are in your the Dane County Jail. So any solution that you might come up with, and I'm not, discounting anyone's opinion here. What I'm saying is that there's an issue of representation, and there's also an issue of expertise. And it's not just evidenced by what I'm saying, or evidenced by the lack of the quote-unquote experts in this room, but it's also evidenced by the huge disparities that we see. My question is that when you attempt to address a disparity, what do you do different? And what have you done to perpetuate those disparities? Can you speak to, if you can, the role that you feel the Madison Police Department has played in the disparities that we see in Dane County?
The role we have played, I start out, you weren't here at the beginning, I started out by commenting and lauding the backbone and the character of the people that I select and the caliber of which they come. And I don't apologize for the selection process because it's inclusive, it's comprehensive, it deals with ideology in essays and in oral boards, and it incorporates references from the citizens that represent the city of Madison. There's a vetting process, there's a process that goes far beyond in the academy to talk about unconscious bias, cultural competencies, cultural sensitivity, race in the police, Project Innocence. We talk a lot about the social sciences that lead to root causes of these disparities. But at the end of the day, there's nothing in and of itself that I can wave my magic wand and provide to you what is it that's broken manifestly that I can point to that I'm willing to fix overnight. We're looking at a whole bunch of stuff, and we are trying to the extent that we can to elicit community stakeholders to tell us what they think needs improvement, which is why part of the reason I'm here. But no, I think that one of the problems has been in the way that the dialogue has gone on is that while some have said we're really concerned about how African American men are being profiled in the neighborhoods, I'm also concerned about who's speaking up for the fact that, and actually African Americans are 7% of our demographics based on the last census. Why is it that 32% of our African Americans are victims? Why is the victim rate 4 times what it should be? We're always concentrating on offenders. I'd like us to spend some more time with those who are victimized and why, and how we can help them better too.
Well, I don't see any problem in doing that.
Good.
However, to my question, you mentioned that there's a role that the Madison Police Department plays.
Right.
And you proceeded to talk about your top of the line training program. I'm not saying that your vetting process needs changing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm getting at. I would assume that it does, if that's part of what plays a role in perpetuating these disparities. I'm mainly speaking to the fact that here we are attempting to, I hope, address these disparities, and I'm not hearing how you feel Madison Police Department plays a role in those disparities. You've already said that there is a role that's played, but I'd like to know what your viewpoint is. I have my own views.
I express my views in the sense that I think sort of things that are going to bring about constructive across-the-board change are some of the legislative initiatives that I'm willing to lend my name to and go up and to lobby for those issues. I'm looking at the big picture. I can't look at everything all at once. I have to look at those things that I have some control over.
Okay.
And that's the bottom line, is that I don't think I'm going to be able to ever meet with a lot of folks' expectations. I can only say I'm going to try.
I respect that.
Thank you. I do have to start the table because I was supposed to be somewhere in 15 minutes because I think we're supposed to go to 7:30. Take maybe 2 more questions and then I got to go. Yeah.
So I've heard from a lot of folks that they do, and I do appreciate you having forum like this too. I work in the community. I work for 2 nonprofits on Willie Street, and this is the first time I've heard of a forum. And looking it around, and I was here from the beginning, and it's less than 10% of the folks who showed up here is a person of color. And what I'm curious about is, what are you doing to actually get folks out to have an open dialogue with you? And another thing is, the 2 gentlemen that were here earlier, I felt like you were being really dismissive to them. And when somebody in a minority, like when a minority speaks up and you're dismissive of them, it kind of shows everyone else that, like, you know, maybe I don't want to talk to you because you might be that way to me too. And it doesn't have to be a person of color, because when this lady right here was talking about how you dismiss kind of YGB because they use swear words, right? I
think I was talking about the culmination of where it got to the point where it wasn't protected speech.
And so we disregard their message because it wasn't a protected speech?
No, I said I can't disregard that dropping F-bombs in a private mall is not protected speech. That was my point.
But I don't think throughout this entire conversation, I didn't hear anything until Eric showed up about kind of what YGB's message was. It was more of like, their action was wrong, their action was wrong, their action was wrong. But what was the actual message that led to acting wrong? And that's what I'm more curious about, is like open dialogue. I don't see a lot of participation of the people of color that I actually work with, who actually do deal with the police on a daily basis. And I don't see them in here. And then when they show up in here and they're dismissed, I mean, like, I don't blame them for not coming here.
Well, I have to say, to be honest with you, is that because we have a limited time, and they had vented and we're going into personal anecdotes, I try to cut them a little bit slack, but I also want to be able to
But
be
5 minutes ago,
inclusive
you
of
just told
everyone.
Eric that
Huh?
a part of why this forum exists is for people to vent,
And
for
that's-
you to listen.
That was very clear. I got that message loud and clear.
And I mean, like, to be quite honest, because, yeah, I mean, Eric wasn't here before, but I felt like, kind of like, to be quite blunt, I was thinking like, wow, I really hate this guy because of the way you treated some of these folks.
Well,
But you
that's
were a
your-
little bit more civil when he walked through that door.
That's your perception and that's your opinion.
And I am, I mean, like, I am one of your constituents. And to dismiss me because I am one person who is speaking up. But when you do that, I don't think anyone else is going to line up behind me to actually talk about it. Because of the way you do talk to people. It's very condescending.
Well, I'm sorry that that was the impression I gave. I did not intend that to be the case.
It's
I was
not-
just trying to create a little bit of a decorum so that more people could contribute to the response. And if that was an unintended byproduct that you perceived from me, I do apologize to you and to them and to the audience. That was not my intent.
And one of my biggest criticisms from just seeing you tonight is kind of like, I'm sorry, it's just,
Well, I have to tell you one thing. Since you were here from the outset,
yeah.
I should tell you, I'm not polished. I'm likely to be sort of contentious. And that is a part of me. I don't mean it to be disrespectful. But I also am pretty determined in my resolve to what I think I have to do for this city. And that means representing everyone. And to the extent that the neighborhoods continually come up in the issue bin, whether people like me or hate me is really inconsequential in the end of the day. That's not the legacy I'm going to leave. The legacy I'm going to leave is that all of our people, as a matter of constitutional rights, have the fullest understanding and appreciation for equal protection of the laws, which means the police are going to be in all the neighborhoods.
And I'm not
Nothing's gonna
saying for you
change
to
that.
get out. I mean, like, here's the thing is that earlier, I'm sorry, I'm like blanking right now because I'm so emotional just from this forum. Because I mean, like, you know, I don't think you're here to, because the first lady who spoke said that you were over appeasing YGB and their demands. I don't think you should appease anybody. I think you should listen to them. I think you should actually hear what they're saying and then take some concrete steps. I don't really care if you agree with them. I want to see you do something to solve the actual problem that they're trying to get at. And that's what pisses me off is I feel like this forum is just kind of propaganda to let people know that, oh, you know, I am a good person, to make people like you, but you're not actually doing anything on the ground that helps the people, the victims. I mean, like, I've been a victim of domestic violence. I've been run over by a car, and you know what the police officer told me? You need to up and move out of this neighborhood. And my neighbors have been there. It was Carling, right next to Allied. And my neighbors had been there for 7 years. I was fortunate enough to get the jobs that I do have, to uproot myself from there. But my neighbors had been there for 7 years. Some people don't have that luxury to uproot themselves out of neighborhoods that we do not focus on. And I think I'm pretty sure, like, the police department is a part of the problem. And I would like to see something change, not to hear you saying you agree with me or you agree with our neighbors. Some actual concrete, tangible things that can work for the community.
I think you and I are going to have to agree to disagree in this, because I think I am doing just that. I think I'm serving our community by upping the ante of those neighborhoods that are being served with officers to be more like social workers with a badge. I think that's the way we're at our best relationally. And I'm sorry that you don't agree with that tack, but that is going to be the tack moving forward.
But you're not social workers with that.
No, we're not. We're cops. And I gotta go.
How can you address the issue if you don't know and you can't speak to how you're playing a role in the issue?
All I will say is that I have been hearing from a lot of constituents in a lot of neighborhoods, and I feel welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People who show up to the forums are wealthy white privileged folks.